You know, they say the DSLR is dead, but this Nikon D780 is all like... Hey guys, Omar here, and this is a little bit of a weird camera. It's actually kind of like two cameras in one because it is built like a DSLR, acts like a DSLR, but has the capabilities of a mirrorless camera. So this is kind of a little bit of like a gateway camera for those people that maybe aren't ready to jump into mirrorless or prefer an OVF. So we're going to discuss this camera, who's it for, and if you should instead get a DSLR or jump into Nikon's Z lineup, which is their mirrorless lineup. Now, if I was going to buy a Nikon D780 or any kind of camera, I wouldn't get it on Amazon because there's all kinds of like evil third-party sellers on there. Instead, I would get it at B&H. That's right, B&H. Thank you to our friends at B&H for letting us play with the Nikon D780. And in full honesty, I love B&H. That's where I get all my camera gear. They have the same prices as Amazon. They have free shipping as Amazon. And also it's filled with a community of photographers that we respect, and they have workshops at the store. And so try to shop at B&H instead of like an unknown third-party seller that may be selling you who knows what. Thank you, B&H. Now, I've been shooting around with the Nikon D780 for a few weeks, and I'll tell you the one thing that like struck me was the OVF, like the optical viewfinder. I've gotten so used to shooting with an EVF. For those of you that don't know, an electronic viewfinder is like a little television in here. And when you look inside, it's kind of like looking at a screen, a TV, a phone, and you can change your exposure and as you look in there and stuff. But this camera doesn't have that. This has an optical viewfinder. Now, the good thing about that I found is, man, we're staring at screens all day and all the time. Our phones, our computers, and now our EVFs. So to go back to an optical viewfinder, as I was walking around the streets, I realized that I kind of missed it. And so shooting with the Nikon D780 made me nostalgic for a DSLR. Now, by the way, before anyone says or tells you that the DSLR is dead, don't let anyone tell you how to shoot and how to get pictures. Shoot whatever camera you want to. If you want to buy an old DSLR, you should decide for yourself which type of camera you'd like to use. The DSLR is definitely still being sold. It definitely takes wonderful pictures and wonderful video. So don't listen to the people that say mirrorless is the way to go. Those cameras are fantastic. I shoot mirrorless. I love mirrorless cameras. But you need to decide for yourself as opposed to listening to the noise telling you that DSLR cameras are dead. They still take amazing pictures. I just wanted to get that out there because I get comments like, DSLR is dead. Yeah, well, you're dead inside. Okay, moving on. Okay, a few specs real quick. This camera has a 24 megapixel backside illuminated sensor. What does that mean? It takes really good pictures. It also has the same processor you would find in Nikon's mirrorless lineup, the Z6. And like we mentioned before, the camera has two autofocus systems. The autofocus system when you're using the optical viewfinder, the little window in here, and when you click on live view, you get the second autofocus system, the same focus system you find in the mirrorless cameras. I'll let you know what that was like in a second, but let's finish the specs here. The camera shoots beautiful video up to 4K 30. There is no image stabilization if you're doing video, which is a little bit of a bummer. So I paired it up with the 24-120 kit, which is a lens that has, they don't call it image stabilization. What does Nikon call it? VR. Vibration resistance. I think that's what it stands for. Now, I will say that the IBIS in my Z6 II is rock solid compared to a VR lens. So I'll talk more about that later if you're into video, which you should pick up, but I think it was kind of obvious by what I just said. All right, if you're using the optical viewfinder, it shoots 7 frames a second. And if you're using the electronic viewfinder, LCD on the back, if you're using live view shooting, it shoots 12 frames a second, which is insane. It has a beautiful 2.36 million dot LCD screen on the back. The camera has a mini HDMI, a USB-C, it has a mic jack and also a headphone jack, and some kind of weird connector that I don't know what it does. It has 2 card slots and it takes SD cards, not the XQD or CF Express cards, which the mirrorless cameras take. All right, let's talk about autofocus. So when you use this camera, it's kind of like shooting 2 cameras because it has 2 different autofocus systems. If you are shooting it like a DSLR and looking in the optical viewfinder, it has a 51-point little window, and you can change the autofocus modes in that. So you can make it a single focus point. You can go into like a group mode, so you can have like more dots, and you can move your dots around. And there's also a mode called 3D tracking, which actually can detect faces, which I thought was strange, but it can. Inside the OVF, one of the little boxes in 3D mode will prioritize faces of people, which is cool. You can also turn that off if you hate people. So my favorite mode when I was shooting the track event was continuous focus, of course, because things are moving towards you, 7 frames a second, and also using dynamic. I found that 3D focus was great for anything moving this way, back and forth. It tracks pretty good. But for anything running towards the camera, a group of 9 or dynamic was fantastic. It hit just about every shot. Now, to use the second camera in this camera, there's a big live view button. So you actually hit the live view button and now the screen comes on. And you use the camera in a completely different way. So now you can't put the camera to your eye because all the functions and everything are now on the back of the screen. So now you're using it kind of like a phone. So you can actually touch to shoot, you can touch to focus, you can change your focus modes and follow faces. It has face tracking on there. So the back screen has a 296, is that right? 273, I lied there. 273 focus points. And, you know, the other thing about shooting the DSLR, well, let me do it right now. We're doing the positives and the negatives of this camera. Oh, I guess we're reviewing it now. All right. So positives, this fancy little wrist strap. I should put a lens on here. Oh, okay, we're back. Okay, this is the Nikon 24-120 lens on there with VR. But here are the positives. Positive number 1 is the ergonomics of a DSLR. If weight is not an issue to you and you're out shooting wildlife or sports or you're like in harsh conditions, you have large hands, you can't beat the DSLR ergonomics and all the buttons that it has. The D780 was just much more comfortable than my Nikon Z6II. With the Nikon Z6II, I actually had to buy an aftermarket tiny grip at the bottom because my pinky just was like flying off the camera and actually giving me a callus. So the ergonomics is number 1. Actually, that's a lie. Number 1 is image quality. That's the main reason why I've been slowly switching to Nikon, is because just straight out of camera, the images are beautiful, whether it be JPEG or the RAW files, and you're editing the RAW files. I just find the colors and the contrasts, it's exactly what I'm looking for. And so you can get great pictures with any camera brand, duh. However, there is an aesthetic that I found that Nikon has that I never knew it was there. I used to make fun of my best friends because they had Nikons, because I was a Canon guy. 3, I number things, I don't know what number we're on, but another bonus is battery life. My Nikon Z camera, I have to, if I go work a job, I have to have 4 batteries. One of them's just in case, but I'm definitely going through 3 full batteries if I'm shooting like an 8-hour event. This is about 2,000 shots you can get with this versus 400, 600. For you, the optical viewfinder might be a bonus. I found that I was enjoying it for real-time tracking of sports. So EVFs are getting better, like the Nikon Z9 that's coming out. It has no blackout in the EVF, and you can track people like in real time. But my Z6II, it's a little bit delayed with what's actually going on in real life by a millisecond, and it's a little, you kind of just have to get used to that. Going back to the OVF, I realized, wow, this is what's really happening now. This bicycle, this runner is running at this speed, and you can move the camera and track just so much better. So an OVF, you really have to try an OVF and EVF if you're deciding between this and the Z camera, because I will talk about in a second, I did miss the electronic viewfinder a couple of times. So you have to decide which you like better. In a perfect world, this would have an electronic viewfinder that you can switch off and see through the lens and have an OVF. Now, the only camera I know that kind of does that is the Fujifilm X Pro line, X Pro 2, X Pro 1, and the X100 cameras from Fujifilm. They have an optical viewfinder and an electronic viewfinder, so you can choose. But you can't choose here. As soon as you switch on the LCD, that's your electronic viewfinder, is the back of the screen. So you got to think about that. All right, what are some negatives of the camera? Some things I didn't like. The first thing I didn't like was its weight and the attention it brought me. So when I was shooting street photography, man, big DSLR, people look at you. They definitely turn their heads, as opposed to if you're like, hey, I'm just gonna take a little snapshot right here. But if you're out in the woods and you're shooting polar bears and stuff, it's not gonna be a problem. They don't care. All right, another hang-up of mine is when I go from photo mode to video mode. When you switch to video mode, it doesn't save your picture profile. So if I'm shooting in portrait mode photo, I kind of want to shoot in flat profile for video, but the switch doesn't do that. It does it on my Z6 II, but it doesn't do it here. It doesn't save your profile. It will save your shutter speed, which is cool, but you're gonna have to shoot in the same profile or go in and change it every time. The other thing that bothered me a little bit was if I am at a recital or an event, I don't wanna bother the people around me. You know those people that have like their phone on the whole time and they're recording their kid? I don't wanna be that person with a camera. And to shoot video with this, you definitely have to have this really lit up, okay? I dimmed it as much as I could, but everyone knows that you're recording. So I like to have the electronic viewfinder so I can record video like yay. But you can't do that with this. You know, I should probably take the lens cap off. You can't do that with this camera. So you either have to get yourself a loop if you don't want to bother anyone, or, you know, get a mirrorless camera. Now, if you have attention deficit disorder like I do find it a little slow. Like, same at the Z6 II, my complaints were playback was just a little bit slow. You know, so instead of it being instantaneous like some of the other cameras, you shoot, you have to wait for your playback for a second, that kind of stuff. Now, the other hang up is when you have a mirrorless camera and you put your face up to the viewfinder, it switches off live view, but not here. If you go up to the viewfinder, it's going to be dark. You have to constantly use the live view button to go between the two cameras that you have. So that became a little bit annoying for a while. All right, so should you go for this or a Z6 camera? So I think that this camera is great if obviously you don't like the mirrorless lineup at all, you don't like looking in an EVF, you still want the ergonomics and all the buttons, and you're used to having a Nikon DSLR, maybe you're coming from an old one, and you have a bunch of, you know, these Nikon lenses from the G lineup, or some of them from the 50s, 60s that they made. This mount will work with this whole setup. So this camera may be for you if you want the DSLR experience, but you want a little bit of video. Now, should you buy a Z camera, a Z5, Z6, Z6 II? Honestly, I think there's better value in those cameras. A Z5 with a lens is a lot cheaper than this, and it has image stabilization in the body. So if you're a casual shooter, I would look at the Z5 and Z6. The only thing you should know, though, is that you have to invest in either an adapter to use these older DSLR lenses, or you can just start investing slowly in the Z lineup of lenses, which are kind of new, and some of them are expensive. Now, if I was starting from scratch, and I definitely knew I was going to do a lot more video of the kids or vacation and stuff, I would definitely get a Z camera for the image stabilization. Nikon's mirrorless image stabilization is the best that I've tried in any of the cameras. If you shoot mostly photographs and you like an OVF, then this obviously is a better choice. And if you don't need video too much, then really look at the older DSLR cameras. There's a lot of value in maybe a D750 or even like a used D850. Those cameras are beasts, and if you're not doing a lot of video, you might as well get something that's a little bit more powerful. I do think the camera is a little overpriced, so it'd be great if it went on sale, or if this is in the future and it's on a Black Friday sale or something. But currently it's just a little bit expensive for what you get. Personally, I'd rather get a Z6 II, but that's just me. You know you. All right, I hope that was helpful somehow, and I'll see you guys next time.